The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the small town of Maplewood. In the heart of this town, a young woman named Mia stood at the bus stop, her mind tangled in thoughts. She had just finished her shift at the local diner, her feet aching and her heart heavy with uncertainty. Life had become a series of routines: wake up, work, return home, sleep, and repeat. Even the colors of life seemed muted as she waited for the bus, her gaze drifting down the quiet street. As she waited, a slight chill brushed through the air, making her shiver. That's when she noticed a figure approaching, an older man, tall, with a weather-beaten face and tired eyes. He walked slowly, carrying a small envelope in his hand. Something about him seemed strange. He moved differently, as if each step was heavy with purpose. Mia straightened up, curious. "Excuse me, miss," the man said, his voice rough yet gentle. She blinked, a little startled. "Yes." Without another word, he handed her the envelope, his fingers lingering on the paper for just a moment longer than necessary. "This is for you," he said, an unreadable expression in his eyes. And just like that, he turned and continued down the road, his figure fading into the distance. Her heart raced as she stared at the envelope. It was simple, unadorned, but something about it felt significant. She could feel her hands trembling as she flipped it over. No return address, no stamp. Just her name in neat handwriting. As if pulled by an unseen force, Mia slid her finger under the flap and tore it open. Inside was a letter, the handwriting familiar yet distant. It was from her father, a man she hadn't seen in over a decade. The emotion hit her like a tidal wave. She had spent so many years wondering about him, feeling a mix of anger and longing. As she unfolded the letter, her breath caught in her throat. Her heart clenched. The words danced across the page, each one a reminder of the countless nights she had stared at the ceiling, missing him. "I know I made mistakes," the letter continued. "I want you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. I followed your life from a distance." The words narrowed her world, pulling her into a small bubble where it was just her, and the echo of her father's voice resonating in her mind. But then came the heartache. "I'm sick, Mia. I don't have much time left. Before I go, I want to see you again." The letter trembled in her hand as she tried to hold back tears. She had dreamed of this moment 1,000 times, yet now it was here, and it felt surreal. It was a cry for connection, a decision to step out of the shadows, and her heart ached with questions. Should she go? Did she even want to see him after all this time? Lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice the bus pull up beside her. Mia blinked, still lost in the swirl of emotions, then shook her head. The driver nodded, his expression understanding, and drove away. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The world around her faded, and it was just her and the letter, the fleeting connection to a man who had been a ghost in her life. The evening air felt heavy, thick with possibilities. She looked down the road where the stranger had vanished. For a moment she considered running after him, asking questions. Were those tears in his eyes? Did he know how much she had suffered? But just as quickly, she batted those thoughts away. Digging her fingers into the letter, she felt the ink, letters etched into the paper as if they were his lifeline. Those words echoed in her mind, warming her from within. Could he be telling the truth? Did he see the way she fought through life even when she felt invisible? Mia took a deep breath, weighed down by an inner storm. Doubts whispered at the edges of her mind. Was she ready to forgive him, to confront a past that had shaped her? So many questions clashed, making her head spin. Closing her eyes, she focused on the letter. There it was, pure and tangible, a call to action. She remembered when she was small, her father throwing her in the air, her laughter ringing out, both of them shared in that perfect bubble of joy. After all these years, those moments felt like distant stars. What if she could reach them again? What if this was her chance? Before she could convince herself otherwise, she moved, running to her car, a small hatchback that had seen better days but fit her like a familiar coat. She had to see him. Driving through the streets of Maplewood, the world blurred past her. She turned down familiar roads that led her to a small hospital on the edge of town. As she parked and stepped inside, her heart pounded in her chest. The scent of antiseptic and faint flowers filled the air, a stark reminder of fragility. She approached the front desk, her voice shaking. "I'm looking for a patient." The nurse at the desk looked up, her expression softening as she typed something into her computer. "Ah yes, he's in room 204. Mia felt her stomach twist. Each step felt heavier, as if the weight of the entire universe rested on her shoulders. What if he wasn't what she remembered? What if time had changed everything? She tried to quell her fears, but they clung to her like shadows. As she reached room 204, her breath caught in her throat. She hesitated at the door, her hand hovering over the knob. What if he was different? What if he didn't want her there? She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now the reality felt too sharp. Gathering her courage, she pushed the door open. The room was bathed in soft light. There he was, her father, lying in the bed with an array of machines beeping around him. His skin was pale, and he seemed smaller somehow. But even in that moment, she recognized him, the curve of his mouth, the lines marking his face, the gentle rise and fall of his chest. He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. It was a whisper, more a prayer than a question. Her heart broke open at the sound of her name, and all at once the floodgates of emotions broke free. She stepped inside, her legs feeling like jelly. "Dad," she managed to say, wrapping her arms around him. Caught in the embrace, she felt the warmth radiate from him. an anchor amidst the storm of her failings. He held her tightly, his fingers trembling as they wove into her hair. In that moment, all the years of hurt and silence melted away, leaving behind a bond that had always been there, waiting for a moment like this. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Mia's tears flowed freely as she pulled back to look into his eyes. "Why now?" he sighed, a sound filled with regret, fear, guilt. "I didn't know how to face you, Mia. I made terrible choices that hurt you." She searched his eyes frantically, trying to reconcile the man before her with the one who had left. "I suffered a lot, Dad. I know," he said softly, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for the pain I caused. I just wanted to make things right before." Mia looked away, her heart a mix of anger and longing. He reached for her hand, his grip warm and steady. "I can't change the past, but I'm here now." The weight of his words pressed down on her. Could she really forgive him? Was it possible to heal the wounds that had shaped her? Conflict swirled inside her, but a small glimmer of hope flickered in the chaos. "Let's start with the truth," she said slowly. And as the minutes passed, they shared stories both old and new. Laughter broke through the tears. In those fragile moments, the barriers began to crack. Their connection, once frayed, rekindled the way a fire sparks from the smallest of embers. Mia found herself opening up, her voice carrying the weight of years. She spoke of her struggles, her triumphs, and the hollow spaces where love should have been. Her father listened, his eyes glistening with understanding. She could almost feel the walls around her heart dissolving with each word. As the sun dipped lower in the sky outside, they spoke of lost time and newfound chances. The heaviness of their shared history lingered, but there was light in the room now, a bridge being rebuilt with every shared secret, every tender glance. Hours felt like minutes, and the bond between them transformed, filling the room with warmth. For the first time in years, Mia didn't just feel like a girl abandoned. She felt like a daughter cherished and seen. Somewhere in that moment, as they laughed and cried together, she realized that healing doesn't erase hurt. Instead, it adds another layer, gently folding it into the fabric of who they are. Outside, the stars began to twinkle in the deepening night sky. But within those hospital walls, a new story was beginning, a story of forgiveness, love, and the power of second chances. And Mia felt in her heart that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other after all. She was kneeling in the grass, fingers trembling as she clutched the letter against her chest. A cool breeze rustled the leaves, the sun dipping low on the horizon. Mia's heart raced, but it wasn't just the wonder of receiving a letter. It was the recognition of her name written on the envelope in neat, familiar handwriting. It felt like a ghost from the past reaching out across time, demanding to be acknowledged. Earlier that day, Mia had stood at the park, her usual spot to unravel her thoughts. Each day had felt heavier than the last life, seemingly a series of mundane moments. But today she had decided to sit beneath the sprawling oak tree, the one that held memories of laughter and carefree days. She closed her eyes, embracing the fleeting whispers of hope. And then he appeared, an older man, his coat slightly tattered, a hat pulled low over his brow. He ambled toward her, his gait unsteady yet determined. Mia was initially struck by how out of place he seemed, like an actor lost between scenes in a play. But when he paused in front of her, pulling an envelope from his pocket, everything shifted. He had asked, looking down at her with eyes that flickered like distant stars. She replied cautiously, noting the weight of uncertainty in her chest. "This is for you," he said simply, extending the envelope toward her. She took it, confusion and curiosity mingling in her gut. The moment the letter touched her fingers, she felt a surge of warmth spread through her. Somehow, she knew this wasn't just any letter. Still, she hesitated, scanning the man's face for hints of what lay behind this strange delivery. She asked, but the stranger merely shook his head, turning his gaze toward the horizon, almost as if he were remembering something lost. With a heart full of anticipation, she tore the envelope open, her pulse quickening. Inside, neatly folded, was a letter, a lifeline filled with words. As she unfolded it, the world around her faded away, leaving just her and the words etched in ink. "Mia," it began, her breath catching in her throat. The familiar handwriting felt like a lifeline, and she struggled to hold back a flood of emotions, but confusion quickly overwhelmed her. Who would write to her like this? Her father. The thought hit her like a jolt of electricity, the connection sparking memories she had buried deep. She could feel the warmth of her childhood, the laughter, and the love intertwined with the pain of abandonment. "Life has taken us down separate paths," the letter continued. "I've watched you grow from afar, and I've carried the weight of my decisions. If you'll allow me, I wish to explain." Tears brimmed in her eyes, blurring the ink as she read on, each word wrapped around her heart like a vine, squeezing tighter with every line. She was flooded with questions. Why now? Did he really care? For years, she had filled her heart with anger and sorrow, turning days into shadows of what could have been. Just then, her thoughts spiraled into chaos. The park began to spin as the weight of the letter pressed down on her. She lowered herself to the ground, her knees hitting the cool earth, grounding her amidst the emotional storm. She felt the tears spill over and slide down her cheeks as she gazed into the distance where the stranger had vanished. What did he want from her? After so long, was it even fair to consider his request? She pictured his face, the slight curve of his mouth, the way concern shadowed his eyes. What if he truly meant it? What if he wanted to repair the broken pieces? Mia closed her eyes, the letter still clutched in her trembling hands. Memories flooded her mind, the birthday parties that ended in silence, the questions left unanswered. Years spent missing someone she barely knew, wishing for a father but feeling only the void he left behind. Could she really open that door again, or would it just lead to more heartbreak? The longer she knelt there, lost in thought, the more she felt the roots of her pain digging into her, anchoring her to the moment. She had spent so many nights crying herself to sleep, grappling with a past that felt like a heavy coat she couldn't remove. Yet here it was, a chance to confront that darkness, to turn her sorrow into something else. With determination stirring inside her, she stood up, letting the weight of her decision wash over her. She wanted to confront her past, even if it frightened her. Her mind raced as she headed to her car, the sky now painted with strokes of orange and pink. Each heartbeat echoed loudly in her ears, a reminder of her courage. She needed to find him to unravel this intricate web of emotions and finally understand what had driven her father away. Driving through the dimly lit streets, her heart pounded like a drum. How could someone vanish so completely? Questions looped around her mind like a slideshow. Where would she find him and how would he respond? Each uncertainty felt like stepping onto a tightrope, her instincts on high alert. As she pulled into a small diner, one of those classic, old-school places with neon lights buzzing in the night she saw him. He was sitting alone at a corner booth, an uneaten slice of pie sitting forlornly in front of him. Anxiety gripped her gut as she stepped through the door, her heart racing with each step. His eyes met hers, a flicker of recognition igniting a spark within her. She could see the years etched into his face, deeper than she had ever imagined. But there was something else, a vulnerability, a plea for understanding. "Mia," he said softly, gesturing for her to join him. She hesitated, thoughts spiraling inward, but slowly made her way to the booth. "I didn't expect you to come," he admitted, looking down at the table. She shot back, the hurt spilling out with each word. Rubbing the back of his neck, he let out a deep sigh, revealing the pain in his eyes. "I can't change the past. I made mistakes. I thought leaving would spare you pain." Tears brimmed in her eyes as she struggled to hold back her emotions. "Do you know what it was like?" "I know," he replied, his voice breaking. "I've replayed it over and over in my mind, wishing I could take it all back. Fear." It was a word that wrapped around them like a thin veil, filling the air with tension. She asked, her voice trembling. "I know it wasn't," he stated firmly, the determination in his gaze growing, "but I want to make things right, Mia." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Mia's heart teetered on the edge of forgiveness, yet the weight of betrayal hung in the air like a bitter pill. "Tell me everything," she finally demanded, an unexpected strength filling her voice. And as he began to speak, the dam that had held back years of hurt started to break. He spoke of his mistakes, the battles he fought within himself, and the regrets that haunted him. Each word felt like a raindrop in a drought, reviving parts of her that had long been dead. As he shared his story, the pain mingled with moments of clarity. She listened intently, realizing just how deeply regret can affect a person. She knew that love doesn't always manifest in perfect ways. Sometimes it's messy, complicated, and burdened by choices that seem impossible at the time. After what felt like hours, he leaned back, the weight of vulnerability hanging in his eyes. "I wanted you to have a better life, away from what I was." Mia felt a shifting inside her, the realization that forgiving him might lead her back to herself. She had been dragging the chains of resentment for far too long, and the light of understanding began to seep through the cracks. "I've missed you," she whispered, a gentle ache in her chest. "I thought about you every day." His eyes glistened, and for the first time in their conversation, all the barriers seemed to fall. He reached across the table, his hand hovering like a question mark. "Can we start over?" Mia stared at his hand for a moment, conflicted yet hopeful. It wouldn't erase the past, but opening that door could lead to something new. Perhaps they could help each other heal, step into the unknown together. The world outside the diner continued to move, people living their lives without knowing the monumental shift taking place within the little booth. With a shaky breath, she placed her hand in his, feeling warmth spread through their connection. "Yes," she said finally, her voice steady but filled with emotion. In that moment, a sense of peace washed over her. The journey would be long and rocky, but with this small step, they had chosen the possibility of a future together. A future built on honesty, love, and the courage to face the darkness together. And as the sun set beyond the diner, Mia felt a weight lift, optimism taking root where once there had only been despair. The letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the ground like a fallen leaf. The world around Mia hazed in and out of focus, her breath catching in her throat. Just moments before, she had been walking home from work, the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders. Now it felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. A stranger had approached her in the park, an older man with wild silver hair and eyes that held untold stories. He offered her a single, weathered envelope. "It's for you," he had said, voice low and steady. She hadn't taken it seriously at first, believing it was some sort of prank, but as soon as she opened it and saw the unmistakable handwriting, the world around her blurred. She fell to her knees, heart racing, hands trembling as she fought to comprehend what was happening. The letter had been sent from the father she hadn't seen in over a decade, a man who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only silence and shadows. The ink felt familiar, warm against her fingertips, and with every word she read, memories surged like waves crashing against the shore. Mia, it began as if he were speaking directly to her, pulling her once more into the labyrinth of their shared history. In that moment, she felt something deep inside her crack open. Memories she had buried rushed to the surface: her father's laughter, the games they'd played, the way he had held her when she was afraid. Those memories had long since turned bitter. She had filled her heart with anger and longing, masking it with indifference. But now, standing in the twilight of the park, she felt those emotions flood back. The letter continued, each sentence drawing her deeper into the storm of her feelings. I regret every day of my absence, each birthday, every Christmas, you were on my mind. Her knees sank into the cool grass, her heart racing as tears brimmed in her eyes. Could it be true? Had he really thought about her, even from afar? As she gripped the letter tighter, an ache blossomed in her chest. Was she ready to confront a past that had left her heart so scarred? She looked up, searching for the old man who had handed her this lifeline. But he was gone, vanished like the memories of laughter that had once adorned her days. The dusk wrapped around her, a heavy blanket urging her to process what she had just learned. She whispered to herself, staring at the letter. Over the years, she had built walls so high around her heart that even a whisper of hope seemed impossible to climb. The absence of her father had molded her into something fierce, for better or worse. She had learned to rely on herself to forge her own path. But now a small flicker of yearning ignited within her. Taking a deep breath, Mia stood up slowly. The letter, still clutched in her hand, felt foreign yet comforting. She understood this was more than just words on a page. It was a key to a box long buried. The sun began to set, casting golden light through the trees as she walked home, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities. Could she heal that wound? Could she face the man who had walked out of her life only to step back in unexpectedly? That night she barely slept. The letter lay on her nightstand, dimly lit by the glow of her lamp. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the man who had once been her hero, reduced to a mere memory. Would her heart recognize him after all this time? The next morning felt heavy with anticipation. The weight of the decision bore down on her, but she knew she couldn't ignore the call any longer. She grabbed her keys, her heart racing as she headed toward the small coffee shop near her old neighborhood. A fuzzy warmth wrapped around her as she walked in through the doors. It had been ages since she visited, but the scent of freshly brewed coffee brought a rush of nostalgia. The cafe buzzed with people, but she arrived focused on one thing: finding him. Mia scanned the room, and her heart pounded harder when she spotted the figure in the far corner of the cafe. His silver hair caught the light, a stark contrast to the youthfulness she remembered from her childhood. She hesitated, fear creeping into her mind. What would she say? How would she even begin to unravel this complicated tapestry of emotion? But then the image of the letter came flooding back, his words, his regrets, and she felt something shift within her. It was time to confront this. With determination blooming in her chest, she advanced toward him. Her voice was barely a whisper, but his head snapped up at the sound. Their eyes locked for the first time in years, and everything fell quiet. Recognition washed over him, mixed with surprise. He breathed, his voice cracking like the past itself. He rose slowly, the weight of those lost years tangible in the air between them. As they stood face to face, the memories danced around them like ghosts. She wanted to reach out to close the gap with an embrace, but she felt anchored by doubt and resentment. She managed to ask, her voice steadier than she felt. His face fell, lined with regret. I've carried this weight too long. I wanted to reach out to explain, but I was paralyzed by my own fears. With each word, she felt a storm brewing within herself, a mix of anger and longing. You didn't just hurt me, you left. She could see the tension in his shoulders. I see that now. But I want to make amends. So they sat at a small round table, uncertainty weaving a tightrope between them. The coffee shop buzzed with life, but to Mia it felt like they were in their own world, balancing on the edge of vulnerability. He opened up, speaking of the struggles that had pushed him away, his demons, his inability to cope with the responsibilities of fatherhood. His words poured out in a rush, as if he had been holding on to them for too long. I thought it would be better for you to let you live a life free from me. Mia listened, her heart warring with itself. In that moment, she understood fear in its rawest form, the fear of failure, the fear of being unworthy, the fear of hurting those we love most. She saw him as a complex human being rather than just the father who had abandoned her. The conversation shifted, and for the first time, she felt a glimmer of understanding. I've thought about you every day, he confessed. Each birthday, each milestone, I felt the void of being absent. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and the anger that had held her captive for so long began to ebb away. I was so lost without you. They shared stories, laughter emerging from the pain, and slowly the animosity began to dissolve. It was as if they were peeling back layers, revealing something raw and beautiful, a chance for rebirth, a chance for forgiveness. The hours slipped away unnoticed. In those quiet moments, Mia found herself opening up about her struggles, her victories. She let him see the scars left behind by those lost years, and to her surprise, he listened without judgment. I never wanted to be someone's burden, she admitted, her voice a small flicker of vulnerability. He nodded, his expression softening. I never wanted to be a ghost in your life. That night something shifted within her. By the time they left the cafe, darkness had enveloped the world outside, but light danced in Mia's heart. Together, as they walked through the city streets, it felt like a path had been forged between them, a powerful connection birthed from the ashes of pain and uncertainty. They exchanged stories, laughter echoing into the night, and before long it felt as if years of absence were unraveling into something new. Mia turned to her father, now walking beside her, and she realized that perhaps the future could hold more than just memories of hurt. It could be filled with new moments, new memories to create together, overcoming the past step by step. As they reached the park once more, the same spot where it had all begun, Mia knew that this was only the beginning. Together they stood beneath the stars, contemplating the road ahead, a path marked by growth, courage, and an unwavering bond. It feels different now, she murmured, glancing up at the twinkling sky. Together we will be, he said, hope flickering in his eyes. And as the night deepened, Mia felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of possibility blooming, illuminating the darkness that had once consumed her. She understood that forgiveness was not about forgetting, it was about acknowledging the past while embracing the future. A future where she no longer had to walk alone. The sound of laughter echoed in the small park, mingling with the rustling leaves, creating a comforting symphony that should have felt familiar. But for Mia, it was just background noise. As she sat alone on a weathered bench, her heart was a weight in her chest, heavy with unspoken woes. Just another dull afternoon filled with the reminder of all she had lost. Suddenly, her solitary moment was interrupted. A figure approached, a man, perhaps in his late 60s, with wild white hair and a tattered coat that flapped around him as he walked. He looked out of place, like a character pulled from a forgotten storybook. The way he moved had a certain urgency, and something about him drew Mia's attention. As he neared, he stopped and looked right at her, his blue eyes piercing and intense. "Mia," he said, as if he had known her all along. She blinked, taken aback. He held out an envelope, worn and creased, like it had traveled miles to reach her. There was no return address, just her name scrawled across the front. Mia hesitated, fear and curiosity battling within her. "Just a letter," he replied, his voice firm but gentle. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving her stunned. She couldn't shake the feeling that the envelope held something significant. Heart racing, her fingers brushed against the paper. She whispered to herself. At that moment, an impulse surged through her. She ripped open the envelope, her heart pounding harder. Inside was a letter, handwritten in an elegant script that felt eerily familiar. The moment she caught sight of the first few words, her breath hitched in her throat. No, it couldn't be. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the letter completely, and her mind raced with frantic thoughts. The writing belonged to him, the father she hadn't seen in years, the man who vanished one day from her life without explanation. Each word felt heavy with regret, each line unfurling old wounds she had thought long buried. He spoke of regret, of watching her grow from a distance, and of the fear that had kept him silent all those years. "I've missed you more than you can imagine," he wrote. "I never wanted to hurt you." Tears surged in her eyes as the memories flooded back, birthday parties spent wishing he would show up, late-night talks that never happened, the hole he left in her heart. She fell to her knees, clutching the letter like a lifeline. The world around her blurred as shards of anger and sorrow shattered her composure. She cried out, her heart racing with the turmoil of emotions. But no answer came, only the gentle rustle of the leaves above her. Mia felt as though the ground beneath her was giving way, and for a moment she was untethered, spiraling into the abyss of her feelings. She remembered the night spent wondering where he was, what he was doing. She thought she had put those thoughts to rest, buried them deep beneath layers of resilience and independence. Yet here they were, surging back, raw and powerful. Gathering herself, she wiped away her tears and looked around. The park felt the same, yet different. Everything held a weighty significance, and she realized it was time to confront the ghosts of her past, the unresolved questions and anger she had buried under a facade of strength. She whispered as she folded the letter neatly. Taking a shaky breath, Mia stood up and glanced around, watching the families enjoying their day, oblivious to her turmoil. The stranger had delivered her past wrapped in an envelope and now left her standing with an impossible choice. Just then she caught her reflection in a nearby pond, the evening light casting shadows across her face. The resolve in her eyes pushed back the fear. She was not that lost girl anymore. She was a woman who had fought her way through heartache, disappointment, and loss. Quietly, she made her way to her car, the old engine sputtering to life. The letter sat on the passenger seat, a haunting reminder of what was to come. Driving through the familiar streets, her heart felt like a drum beating irregularly, each thump forcing her to confront her truth. She didn't know where he was now, the father she hadn't seen in a decade, but she felt an undeniable pull to find him, to unravel the mystery of his absence. The more she drove, the more resolute she became. She needed answers, and she needed to face him. At the end of a winding road, Mia parked outside a small, unassuming house tucked between towering trees. It looked oddly familiar, like a moment jolted from a dream. Taking a deep breath, she climbed out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath her feet. Walking toward the door, she felt the weight of uncertainty mixed with a desperate hope. Would he be willing to talk? Would he recognize her? As she knocked, her palms grew sweaty, the sound echoing ominously in her ears. Time felt frozen as she waited, heart racing. And then the door opened. A man stood before her, slightly older but unmistakably him, her father. Their eyes locked, and Mia felt a surge of emotions crashing over her, a tidal wave of relief, anger, and confusion washing over her at once. The word escaped her lips in a mixture of disbelief and longing. He breathed, astonished. Moment there was no need for words as they both took a step closer, caught in a surreal convergence of past and present. He opened his arms and she stepped into the embrace, feeling the warmth she had missed for so long, but even in that moment ghosts haunted them both. She asked, her voice shaky as they pulled apart. What happened? His face fell, a blend of regret and sorrow etched into his features. I was scared of failing you. I needed you, she shot back, hurt spilling over. No, he said, eyes glistening with unshed tears, and I'm so sorry I see that now. Mia felt anger rising, but beneath it lay a flicker of understanding. Fear had driven his choices, yet she had paid the price. You didn't trust me to love you for who you were, she said slowly. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of shared memories. For the first time she could see him clearly, not just as a father, but as a flawed human being. You're right, he finally admitted. I was foolish. Mia studied his face, searching for the father she had lost. The lines etched into his skin told stories of pain and suffering, perhaps moments spent regretting decisions he could not take back. Standing before him, she understood the complexity of their relationship, pain wrapped in love, loss framed in hope. Tell me everything, she demanded, her heart pounding. And so he sat her down, stories unraveling like tendrils of smoke, delicate yet weighty. He confessed to the battles he fought within himself, the demons that had convinced him leaving was the answer. The world had pressed down on him and he had caved. I've watched you from afar, he said, eyes brimming with emotion. I wanted to reach out, but fear paralyzed me. I held onto my shame for so long. Mia listened, each word revealing layers of truth. She saw the struggles he had faced, the emotional scars that he bore, each choice a reflection of his fragility. The more he shared, the more the anger within her softened, replaced by an understanding that cut through the years of pain. I don't want to keep rehashing the past, she said finally. His face lit up with a glimmer of hope. Can we start over? The offer lingered in the air, a delicate thread dangling between them. The thought of moving forward was terrifying, the uncertainty of what lay ahead loomed large, but Mia felt something shift, like the first rays of dawn breaking through the night. Let's take it slow, she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. Tears trickled down her cheeks as they began to weave a new story together. They talked about everyday things, about her life, her dreams, and the journey that had brought her here. The warmth of connection filled the space between them, the past slowly unraveling into something new and hopeful. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow through the windows, Mia felt lighter. The heavy weight that had anchored her heart for so long was beginning to lift. She discovered a profound truth. Healing does not come from forgetting. Instead, it comes from acknowledging pain and choosing to move forward together. It feels different now, she said softly, looking out at the horizon where the sun kissed the earth goodbye. Together, he echoed, a promise laced in his voice. And as they sat side by side, two hearts navigating the complexities of forgiveness and hope, Mia realized she had found the path home, a path not just to her father, but to the lost child within herself. In that small house, surrounded by the warmth of newfound connection, she knew they were embarking on a journey together, one step at a time. And as the twilight turned to night, Mia felt the stirrings of joy returning, a spark of possibility illuminating the darkness of her past. Mia stood at the edge of the park, her heart heavy with the weight of unfulfilled dreams. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the sun shining brightly in a cloudless sky, yet everything about that day felt like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. She had just left her job at the bookstore, a place that offered her solace but failed to fill the empty spaces in her heart. As she made her way home, she hardly noticed the laughter of children playing on the swings or the random chaos of dogs chasing frisbees. All she felt was a gnawing sense of loneliness. Suddenly, a stranger appeared before her. He was an older man with wild white hair and tattered clothes that fluttered as he moved. She barely had time to process his presence before he stepped closer, his intense blue eyes locking onto hers. Mia, he said as if he had known her forever. Mia took a step back, caught off guard. No, but I know something you need, he replied, extending an envelope toward her. It looked old and worn, the edges frayed as if it had been in someone's pocket for too long. She asked, her heart racing in confusion and curiosity. It's a letter for you, he said, his voice a calming presence amid the chaos in her mind. The old man merely smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. It's yours. Before she could ask anything else, he turned and walked away, leaving Mia standing there, clutching the strange letter as a mixture of excitement and apprehension bubbled within her. The moment she got home, she settled onto her small, worn-out couch and stared at the envelope. It felt as if it pulsed in her hands, filled with meaning. She flipped it over, her name written in neat handwriting, and suddenly her curiosity twisted into anxiety. Who could have sent her a letter like this? With trembling fingers, she tore the envelope open. As she unfolded the paper inside, she felt a chill run down her spine. The handwriting was familiar, the kind of script that brought back childhood memories, memories of someone she hadn't thought about in years. As she read the first line, her heart sank. Just like that, everything around her faded. It felt as if she had slipped into another world, one where memories and reality collided. Each word pierced her like a knife, unraveling years of buried emotions. Her father, the letter was from him. It had been over a decade since he had disappeared from her life, leaving nothing but questions and heartache behind. She read on, her heart racing, anger and longing swirling inside her. I know that my absence has caused pain. I've missed you every day and I've wanted to reach out, but I didn't know how. Fear kept me away. Mia felt a flood of tears welling in her eyes. All those birthdays she had spent alone, waiting for a father who never came. All those long nights where the silence had screamed louder than any words could. In that moment, she felt both the warmth of nostalgia and the icy grip of betrayal. Knowing what she had suffered throughout the years made her feel angry. She whispered, the weight of a decade's worth of hurt crashing upon her. There was a plea for forgiveness in the letter, an almost desperate yearning for a chance to make things right. I want to see you one last time. Mia fell to her knees, the letter slipping from her grasp and landing on the floor. It was overwhelming, the emotions swirling like a tempest. Could she truly forgive him? Could she face the person who had broken her heart? Moments turned into what felt like hours. She sat there, battling with herself. On one hand, she longed to hold her father again, to hear his voice and feel the love she had missed for so long. On the other, the wounds he had caused were so deep, they felt almost unhealable. Finally, taking a deep breath, she mustered the strength to push herself off the floor. The world outside her window lay bathed in the golden light of dusk. With a sudden determination, she decided she would confront this stranger, her father, for all the pain he had caused in the years they had lost. The next day, Mia found herself standing outside a small cafe in a neighborhood she remembered from childhood. Her heart raced as she pushed open the door, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Bell over the door jingled, but as she stepped inside, the world felt heavy. There he was, seated at a table in the corner, looking older and more fragile than she remembered. She hadn't seen him since she was 13, when he had made the decision to leave without saying goodbye. Now it was as if time had stood still for him while her life had raced forward without him. He said, looking up, a blend of disbelief and hope illuminating his expression. "Yeah, it's me," she replied, her voice trembling. His eyes filled with tears as he motioned for her to sit. "I thought about you every day. I wanted to reach out, I truly did, but I was paralyzed with guilt and fear." She echoed, the anger rising in her throat. "You abandoned me." He flinched at her words, and she could see the pain etched on his face. "I know, and I'm so sorry for that. There's no excuse for my actions." Mia studied his face closely, searching for the man she had once adored, hoping to find traces of that warmth and love. "You were supposed to be my dad," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I failed you," he replied, anguish spilling from his eyes. "I thought leaving would spare you pain, but it only brought more." As he spoke, she felt a flicker of something within her, an urge to understand. The years of resentment still hung thick in the air between them, yet there was an unspoken desire to find some kind of closure, to heal from the wounds they had both carried. "Tell me everything," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. His story spilled forth, a mix of shame and regret. He spoke of struggles with addiction, battles against a darkness within himself that he couldn't conquer. "I didn't want you to see me that way," he admitted. As he continued, Mia felt the walls she had built begin to crack. Understanding washed over her like a wave, drowning out the anger. She recognized the pain he had faced, the internal demons that had driven him away. It didn't excuse his actions, but it painted a picture she hadn't seen before. "I didn't just lose you, I lost myself," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm working on making changes." She remained silent, the weight of his admission hanging heavy in the air. He had sacrificed so much, but could she find it within herself to forgive him? The question loomed over her like a shadow. "You can't erase the past," Mia said slowly, "but I'm willing to give it a shot." Hope flickered in his eyes, and for the first time they shared a sense of connection. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could carve a new path. With her heart racing, she gathered the courage to lay it all on the table. "I've dreamed about this moment," she confessed, tears glistening in her eyes, "but I'm also terrified." "I understand," he said softly, reaching across the table. "I'm not asking for forgiveness overnight. I know it will take time, but I'm here now." As Mia looked into his eyes, she felt the ache of the past slowly begin to morph into something new. Maybe they could be a father and daughter again. Maybe this was just the beginning of a journey back to each other. They talked for hours, piecing together the fragments of their lives, sharing stories of pain, joy, and everything in between. Laughter started to weave its way through their conversation, filling the gaps that had once seemed impossible to bridge. As they shared those precious moments, the sun began to set outside, casting a warm glow through the cafe windows. In that moment, Mia understood that healing does not come from forgetting. It comes from confronting the past with resolve, choosing to grow and embrace the future. The weeks turned into months, and their bond slowly began to mend. They set new traditions, like going for weekly coffee dates and exploring new places together. Although the journey was far from perfect, it felt genuine. With each new conversation, they navigated the complexities of their relationship, tackling the hard questions and letting each other in. Slowly, the anger and resentment began to fade into something more profound, an understanding rooted in compassion. One crisp autumn day, they found themselves walking through the park where they had first met again. Bright red and golden leaves fell around them like confetti, celebrating the journey they had taken together. "I still can't believe I almost didn't reach out that day," he said with a chuckle, glancing at Mia. "I'm glad you did," she replied, warmth flooding her heart. With a smile breaking across his face, he nodded. As they walked side by side, Mia felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life was still unpredictable, full of challenges, but she had learned that love could blossom even from the darkest of places. Together, they had turned the page and started to write a new chapter, one filled with forgiveness, healing, and the promise of a future that, while uncertain, was worth every step. In the distance, the horizon painted a vivid picture, a reminder that no matter what happened, the sun would rise again. And hand in hand, they took a step toward that new day, their hearts finally free to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the small cafe at the corner of Maple Street. Mia sat at a table by the window, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. Around her, laughter filled the air, but she felt like a ghost drifting through life, a mere observer. Her mind was elsewhere, wrestling with feelings she had buried deep. As she gazed outside, she noticed a shadow moving in her periphery. A man approached the entrance, his clothes tattered and worn. He looked like he had wandered out of another time, his hair wild and unkempt. Mia couldn't help but stare at him, curiosity prickling her skin. With a sudden burst of determination, he pushed open the door and entered the cafe, the bell above tinkling softly. He scanned the room, and to Mia's surprise, his eyes locked onto hers. For a brief moment, everything fell silent, as if the entire cafe had faded away. He asked, his voice shaky but filled with purpose. Her heart raced. "No," he replied, stepping closer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a weathered envelope, holding it out as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Confusion washed over her. "It's a letter." With cautious hands, she accepted the envelope, feeling its weight as though it carried the secrets of the universe. The man shrugged. "I can't say." Before she could ask more questions, he turned and walked out as quickly as he had come, leaving Mia staring at the envelope. Her mind raced. Should she open it here, away from prying eyes? What could it possibly contain? Taking a deep breath, she tore open the envelope, her hands trembling. Inside, a single sheet of paper awaited her, the words barely visible through a veil of fear and anticipation. She unfolded it, and the scent of old paper wafted into the air. "Mia," it began. She felt her heart drop into her stomach. It was from her father, the man who had walked out of her life years ago without a word of explanation. The man she hadn't seen since she was a child. Memories flooded back, laughter, stories, and ultimately, the heavy silence that replaced it when he left. Time seemed to freeze around her, and the noises of the cafe faded into a dull hum. Each word she read felt like a blade plunging into her heart, unearthing feelings of anger, abandonment, and longing all at once. "I am so sorry I hurt you. I regret every moment of silence." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the ink. She had spent years grappling with resentment and pain, trying to fill the void left by his absence. She muttered, her voice catching in her throat. The pain of lost years threatened to drown her. The memories of birthdays spent alone and holidays filled with silence flooded her mind, mixing with a swell of emotion she thought she had buried forever. "I want to see you," the letter continued. Suddenly, a wave of anger surged within her. She whispered, the weight of her feelings spiraling over her like a storm. How could he simply pop back into her life with a letter after disappearing for so long? She felt her body fall to its knees, the letter slipping from her fingers and landing softly on the floor. She cried, feeling a torrent of emotions flooding her heart. Around her, the cafe patrons had resumed their chatter, oblivious to the emotional duel unfolding in the corner. But Mia felt trapped in her own world, the letter now a lifeline she both wanted and feared. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself, pushing off the ground with shaking hands. She had never imagined she would find herself in this situation. Should she ignore the letter, dismiss it as another empty promise? Or should she confront the father who had caused her so much pain? After a moment's hesitation, she picked up the letter, her heartbeat pounding against her ribs. No, she couldn't let this opportunity slip away again. This was her chance to confront all the emotions that had haunted her. With a trembling hand, she wiped her tears and stood up, her resolve hardening. She would face him. That night she couldn't sleep. The letter lay open on her bedside table, the glow of the moon casting a soft light over the words. Every line echoed in her mind, urging her to take action. She thought of her childhood dreams, of bedtime stories and shared laughter, all transformed into a haunting silence. At dawn, after sleepless hours, she climbed into her car, determined to find him. The address listed in the letter led her to a small, run-down apartment building. Her heart raced as she parked, uncertainty clawing at her insides. Mia took a moment to gather herself. Was she ready for this? Questions swirled in her mind. Would he even want to see her? Would he regret everything again? Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car and made her way to the entrance. As she climbed the stairs to his apartment, echoes of doubt filled her mind, but she pressed on, her heart hammering against her chest. Each step felt heavy and loaded with history. Finally, she stood at his door, her hand hovering above the bell. Could she really do this? Could she confront the man who had left her behind? With the sound of rushing blood in her ears, she pushed the button. The door creaked open. He stood there, older, wearier, but unmistakably him. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, a decade of silence hanging heavily in the air. He seemed almost unsure, as if he had been waiting for this moment for far too long. "Dad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped back, motioning for her to enter. She crossed the threshold, feeling the weight of their shared history pressing down on her. It felt surreal, like stepping into a memory she couldn't quite place. The apartment was small, cluttered, and somewhat faded, echoing the life he had built away from her. In that moment, she felt both anger and sorrow. Anger for the father who had left, and sorrow for the man who stood before her, clearly weary from battles waged within himself. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hesitant yet hopeful. It was a question that had been haunting her for years, an accusation she needed to unleash. "I was scared," he admitted, looking down. "Scared of what I had become, scared to hurt you," she echoed, bitterness creeping into her tone. His expression crumpled at her words, pain flitting across his face. "I never stopped thinking about you. I watched you grow from afar, and it broke my heart every day." Mia felt her defenses begin to crack. She wanted to be angry, she had every right to be, but she also wanted to understand, to peel back the layers of hurt that had built up over the years. "Tell me everything," she insisted, her voice steady but her heart racing, and so he did. He spoke with raw honesty, recounting his struggles and the demons that had led him to leave. He talked about his moments of weakness, his battles with addiction, and the shame that paralyzed him, keeping him from reaching out. "I lost myself," he revealed, his eyes misting over. And in that moment, Mia felt a strange shift, as if the air had thickened with understanding. She learned more about him in those few minutes than she had in years. "I wanted to be someone you could look up to," he whispered. Tears filled her eyes as she listened. His vulnerability was palpable, and for the first time she felt connected to the man before her, the father who had been absent yet present for so long. Finally, she said, "I'm still angry, you know. I can't just erase the hurt you caused, but I want to try to understand." His eyes widened, hope spilling over his features. "Thank you, Mia. That means the world to me." With that simple acknowledgement, they began the slow process of bridging the chasm that had divided them for years. As the days turned into weeks, they found themselves building those missing pieces, slowly stitching together a bond that could withstand their shared scars. They started meeting regularly, sharing meals and stories. Each meeting was filled with laughter, tears, and sometimes uncomfortable silences. They navigated through their feelings, both striving to confront the past while laying the groundwork for a new future. Mia discovered that her father had changed. He was fighting hard to reclaim his life, and as they spent time together, she realized that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, it meant creating space for healing. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, they found themselves at the park where Mia had once played as a child. "At this place," he said, glancing around. "Yeah, I spent a lot of time here waiting for you to show up," she admitted, a smile breaking across her face. "I wish I could take back all those years," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I want to be part of your future." The breeze rustled through the trees, and in that moment Mia felt a wave of warmth wash over her. She had lost so much, but what she had now, this chance to reconnect, felt like a gift. "I'd like that," she said, her voice steady. And as the sunset bathed them in golden light, they stood together, both aware that their journey was just beginning. It wouldn't be easy, but together they could confront the shadows of the past, step by step. The letter that had once sent her spiraling into doubt now felt like a seed of hope growing in the soil of their renewed relationship. As they walked side by side, they forged ahead, ready to face whatever challenges lay in front of them. A father and daughter, finding their way back to each other one precious moment at a time. The summer sun hung high in the sky, its rays dancing through the branches of the old oak tree in the park. Mia sat on a bench, lost in thought, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the patterns on her phone case. It was an ordinary Thursday, but for her, every day felt like a cycle of monotony. Wake up, go to work, come home, and repeat. Lately, even the laughter of children playing at the nearby playground felt like a distant echo, a reminder of joy she could barely remember. Suddenly, she felt a strange presence beside her. A man, slightly hunched with age, approached her. His clothes were worn and a baseball cap sat low on his forehead. He looked like someone who had stories etched into every wrinkle of his face. Without much ceremony, he stopped and stared at her with piercing eyes. "Mia," he said, his voice steady, yet trembling with an undercurrent of urgency. She blinked, surprised that he knew her name. "Here," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a yellowed envelope. Mia looked at the envelope, noticing the familiar handwriting scrawled across the front. It felt almost like a phantom from the past reaching out to her. "Open it, you'll know," the man replied. Before she could ask more, he turned and walked away, leaving her with the envelope that felt heavier than a stone. Confusion blended with a spark of curiosity as she glanced around. The park buzzed with life, yet in that moment she felt utterly alone, suspended in time. She hesitated before tearing it open, her heartbeat thumping loudly in her ears. The words inside felt like a call from another world. Pulling the letter from the envelope, she unfolded it with trembling fingers. "Mia," it began. That single word sent jolts of electricity through her. This handwriting belonged to someone she had not seen in years, from a person who had left an indelible mark on her soul. "If you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to reach out," the letter continued. Her breath caught in her throat and memories flooded back, the warmth of laughter, the scent of his cologne wafting through the house, the crushing silence that followed his departure. The man who had vanished from her life without a word had finally returned, albeit through a piece of paper. "I know I hurt you," the letter continued, each word carved with the weight of time. "I've thought about you every day since I left. I never wanted to hurt you, and I'm so sorry." A wave of emotions crashed over her, tumbling her memories like waves against the shore, pain mixed with longing and betrayal overwhelming her senses. She whispered to herself. Mia felt as if the ground beneath her had shifted. She fought to contain the storm brewing within. This was the man who had walked out on her, the father who had left without so much as a goodbye. Why should she trust him now? Tears filled her eyes as she clutched the letter tightly in her hands, a mix of anger and yearning swirling inside her. She had grown up without him, built walls around her heart, convinced that she was better off alone. But now, confronting his words was like staring into the depths of a long-buried treasure chest, both alluring and terrifying. Suddenly, without thinking, she fell to her knees, the grass cool and grounding beneath her. The letter slipped through her fingers, landing softly on the ground. "You don't get to just show up and expect me to forgive you," she cried, her voice barely above a whisper, the pain cutting deeply. As the tears flowed unchecked, she felt a mix of sorrow and fear. She had spent years crafting her life around his absence. Her heart was raw and the scent of regret swirled in the air around her. Would she be able to confront the ghost of her past? In that moment of vulnerability, she decided she had to confront him if she wanted answers. Gathering her courage, Mia stood up, brushed herself off, and headed toward home, determined to unravel this unexpected twist of fate. As she entered her small apartment, the weight of the letter pressed heavily in her pocket, almost as if it were alive, urging her to act. The world beyond her window began to fade, painted in hues of oranges and purples as dusk approached. She couldn't think of anything else but the question of how she would find him. With renewed determination, she sat down at her kitchen table, opened her laptop, and began searching for any clues, an address, a name, anything that could lead her to him. Information flowed before her eyes like a river, and before long she stumbled upon a small, unassuming town across state lines. Her heart raced with a mix of anxiety and anticipation as she made her plans. The next day she would drive there. She needed to face him, to confront the man who had left so many wounds behind. As she drove through winding roads and fields painted gold by the sunset, her thoughts were a whirlwind. Memories flooded her, a birthday cake he had baked, camping trips filled with laughter. But always, lurking just beneath the surface, was the pain of his absence. Arriving in the quaint town, she found his address a modest little house, overgrown with vines and surrounded by a white picket fence fading into the background. Her heart drummed in her chest, each beat echoing her uncertainty. Taking a deep breath, she approached the door, the wood warm against her palm. With trembling fingers, she knocked. Time stretched as her heart raced, each second feeling monumental. What regrets would she unearth? What answers would she find? The door creaked open to reveal a worn face, lined with a lifetime of stories. There he was, the man whose absence had shaped her entire existence. He whispered, disbelief flooding his features. "Dad," she replied, her heart aching as she took in the sight of him. He stepped back, inviting her in, and she crossed the threshold into a space that felt both familiar and foreign. Everything around her smelled of old wood and memories. She blurted out, seasoned with bitterness. His face fell, visibly pained. "I was afraid," he said, a tremor in his voice. "I thought leaving would protect you." Anger surged through her. "You think leaving me was the answer?" "I know, and that's my greatest regret," he replied softly, looking down. "I've spent years regretting my choices." Mia felt her defenses begin to crack as she witnessed his vulnerability. There was a raw honesty in his expression that forced her to reconsider. He was no longer the distant father who left without explanation. He was a man who had faced his own demons. "Tell me everything," she demanded, her voice steadier. He took a deep breath, recounting his struggles with addiction and the decisions that had spiraled out of control. Each moment shared felt like peeling back the layers of time, revisiting their shared losses but also forging new connections. "I wanted to reach out to tell you how proud I am of the person you've become," he said, his voice breaking as he met her gaze. The anguish in his eyes pierced her heart. Maybe she had built walls without understanding his struggles. Maybe their stories, though separate, were also intertwined. "I've missed you," he confessed, tears shimmering. She remained silent, weighing her feelings. Could she truly forgive him? Could she allow herself to feel again after years of solitude? The memories that haunted her now felt tangled with new light. Finally, she spoke up. I don't think I can just forget the past, but I want to try to understand. A flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. He nodded slowly, reaching out yet still hesitant. And so began their journey of reconciliation, an uncertain path filled with small, tentative steps. They met weekly for coffee, sharing stories of the lost years, discovering the bits and pieces that had defined their lives apart. First, the silences were heavy with unspoken thoughts, uncomfortable. But as the weeks went by, laughter began to slip through those awkward moments, and they both began to heal. Mia learned more about him, his interests, his passions, and even his regrets. Each story told felt like a thread weaving them back together, one stitch at a time. He talked about the love he had for her, even from a distance, the struggles that had haunted him, battles fought silently behind closed doors. Someday I want to show you what I've learned, he admitted one evening, his voice filled with sincerity. And in her heart, sparks of hope ignited, a chance to mend the fractured relationship. As the seasons changed, they became a reflection of renewal in their bond. One chilly autumn day, they walked through the vivid foliage, the air crisp with the coming winter. The laughter of children echoed through the park, a reminder of the innocence long lost. I always loved this time of year, he said, glancing around at the vibrant colors. Me too, she replied, her heart warming. Those were good times, he acknowledged, a touch of nostalgia lacing his tone. Suddenly they stopped beneath a large maple tree, its leaves swirling around them like confetti. In that moment, it felt like everything was falling into place. She asked, a smile breaking through the veil of tension that had once surrounded them. The smile on his face was infectious. Absolutely. And so, the threads of their lives began to stitch together, creating a tapestry of experiences filled with laughter, heartache, and gradual forgiveness. It wasn't always easy. There were days when old wounds ached and doubts resurfaced, but together they learned to weather each storm. They found solace in sharing meals, going on drives, and exploring landscapes that spoke to their souls. Each moment became a step toward healing, a promise to build a relationship nourished with love. One evening, as they sat on the steps of his porch watching the sunset, Mia reflected on how far they had come. You know, it's strange, she began. His gaze warmed and he nodded. Life is a journey, and sometimes it's messy and painful. As dusk blanketed the sky, a sense of peace enveloped them. The letters that had once carried pain now became symbols of hope. They had faced the shadows of their past and decided to move forward hand in hand, no longer defined by separation but united in their shared journey. In that quiet moment, Mia knew they would continue to grow closer, weaving their stories into a new beginning that felt grounded in love. Forgiveness became the foundation for their renewed relationship, a promise to always strive to be better, to strive to love deeper. As darkness fell across the land, they sat together, content in the knowledge that no matter how far they had traveled apart, they were finding their way back to each other, one step at a time. Mia was sitting on a bench at the edge of Whitman Park, her heart heavy as she watched the clouds roll in. It was one of those days when everything felt gray and lifeless, echoing the turmoil inside her. Just another day spent drowning in the weight of her thoughts, wishing desperately for a way out. She thought about the mountains of bills piling up on her kitchen counter and the feelings of isolation pressing down on her like fog. It was a scene she had come to accept more than she liked to admit. Suddenly, a figure stepped into her field of vision. An older man, disheveled and wild-eyed, was approaching her. He wore a trench coat, tattered and faded, ill-fitting, but somehow endearing in its own quirky way. Something about him felt familiar, though she couldn't quite place it. "Mia," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper edged with urgency. Taken aback, she instinctively put her hands to her sides. He extended a yellowed envelope toward her, his hand shaking slightly. Confused and apprehensive, she glanced at the envelope. It looked like it had been through a storm. "Open it," he replied, sincerity radiating from his weary eyes. Something about the desperation in his voice sent a ripple of curiosity through her. Slowly, she reached out and accepted the envelope. When her fingers brushed against the worn paper, an electric jolt ran through her, a feeling she couldn't quite place. With the man's gaze still locked onto her face, her heart raced. She asked, needing to know. He paused, swallowing hard, as if grappling with a memory. "It's time to find out," he said simply, then turned and shuffled away, disappearing into the gray shadows of the park. Mia stared at the envelope, her pulse quickening as she slid her thumb along its edge. She realized she had never seen anything quite like it. It couldn't be anything good. Taking a deep breath, she ripped open the envelope, feeling an exhilarating rush paired with fear of what lay inside. As she unfolded the piece of paper, the scent of aged paper filled her nostrils. And that's when it hit her, a voice she hadn't heard in years sprang to life in her mind. The words were familiar, yet somehow distant. "Mia," it began, and her heart dropped at the sight of the handwriting. Tears welled up in her eyes as more memories rushed in. The handwriting belonged to her father, the man who had vanished when she was just 12, leaving her reeling in the aftermath of silence. Memories flooded back, birthday cards that never came, the coldness of family gatherings without him, and the questions that piled up like stones in her heart. She whispered, her fingers trembling as she continued reading. I know I've caused you pain, and I'm so sorry for that. I've thought about you every single day, and I want a chance to explain. Mia felt the ground shift beneath her. No, she gasped, the betrayal mingling with a longing she had buried deep. Panic clawed at her throat, tears spilling over as she fell to her knees, the letter slipping from her grasp and fluttering to the ground. She couldn't breathe, the weight of lost years crushing her like a heavy blanket. Why now? After all this time, how dare he reach out, expecting everything to fall back into place? Questions swirled around in her mind, battling against the love she once felt for him. Suddenly, she noticed the vibrations of laughter and chatter around her had faded. It was as if the world had drawn back, leaving her in her own bubble of pain and confusion. She curled up her legs and buried her face in her hands, absorbing the emotions that raged within her. Get a grip, Mia, she muttered to herself, trying to force a semblance of calm. She felt a rush of anger, but also the faint whispers of hope entwined with the bitterness. Mia pushed herself off the ground, anger coursing through her body. She had spent years crafting an identity without him, and he didn't have the right to interrupt her life like this. Yet the part of her that longed for answers ached to meet him. Torn between two worlds, she resolved that she needed to confront the past directly. The next day, she found herself standing outside the diner. Every step felt heavier than the last. It looked just as she remembered from the weekend breakfast with her dad before everything fell apart. The door swung open and she stepped inside. The smell of coffee and greasy pancakes filled the air, but it did little to ease the knot in her stomach. She scanned the room, her heart racing, until she spotted him in a booth in the corner. Time seemed to slow as she approached, her pulse echoing in her ears. He seemed older, wearier, yet his eyes shone with a warmth she had long forgotten. Mia, he said, a mixture of surprise and longing coloring his voice. Dad, she replied, biting her lip as she slid into the seat across from him. The table felt small, like the distance between them. Everything was so complicated now. He opened his mouth to say something, but then faltered, his gaze dropping to the table. I can't express how sorry I am, he finally said, his voice trembling. I never wanted to hurt you, she echoed, incredulous. You think abandoning me was the answer? His eyes darkened with guilt. I know, he murmured, running a hand through his hair. I was a coward. A flash of anger ignited within her. Better for whom? He looked pained, and for the first time, Mia saw the depth of his regret. She wanted to scream, to throw the weight of her adolescence at him, but instead she felt a sudden wave of sorrow. She asked, her voice cracking. I want to make things right, he said earnestly. Can we start over? Mia hesitated, uncertainty coiling around her heart like a serpent. She didn't know if she could forgive him. Time had softened her anger but left scars. The air between them hung thick with unresolved emotions, and she felt herself grappling with the memories that had defined her childhood. Just show me you're willing to fight for it, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. I'll do anything. The sincerity lingered in the air, but a flicker of doubt sparked inside her. Could he truly change? Would she allow herself to believe in the possibility of reconciliation? For a moment she was lost in her own thoughts, swirling around the choices they would need to face together. The little diner bustled with activity, laughter and chatter wrapping them in a warm cocoon, but it felt far away, almost like a distant memory. Suddenly she noticed the clock on the wall. It was ticking loudly, seconds slipping away as if time were mocking her indecision. Taking a deep breath, Mia wiped her eyes and gathered herself. She had a choice to make: to forgive him, to try to understand, or to walk away and hold on to her pain. It felt like standing on the edge of an abyss, each choice whispering in her ear. I don't want to rush this, she said finally, pausing as she gathered her thoughts, but I'm willing to take small steps. I understand, he replied, gratitude pouring from his gaze. They spent hours talking, diving into memories, laughter, and tears. Each revelation peeled back the layers of their history, illuminating fears and dreams that had been obscured for too long. But as Mia listened, a sense of unease began to creep in, a gnawing feeling she couldn't shake off. There was a storm brewing beneath the surface, and she could sense it, threatening to disrupt the fragile connection they were building. After their conversation, they stood outside the diner, the cool evening air settling around them. She stared at him, uncertainty still swirling in her chest. I'll need time to adjust, Dad, she said cautiously. I know, he replied softly. I won't push you. As they parted, her heart felt heavier than ever. There was both a thrill and a fear in opening up the door to a father she barely knew. That night, as she lay in bed, the moonlight spilling through her window, Mia struggled to fall asleep. The encounter replayed in her mind like a film on repeat. Everything felt unsettled, like the ground beneath her was shifting. Just when she thought she might find some peace, a sudden knock on her door shattered the stillness. Her heart raced as she swung her legs off the bed and approached the door, curiosity coiling tightly in her chest. Who could possibly be visiting her at this hour? She hesitated before opening it, half expecting to find her father on the other side, or perhaps someone from her past. but as she swung the door open, she was met with two familiar faces, her childhood best friends, Lucy and Jenna. Mia asked, surprised and a little annoyed. "Sorry," Lucy exclaimed, breathless and wide-eyed. "We heard about your dad showing up," Jenna added, her expression serious. Mia felt a rush of emotion surge through her. "I'm fine, we talked and it was," Lucy pressed. Mia opened her mouth, ready to respond, but suddenly felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. She couldn't share everything that had transpired. "I just don't know if I can trust him yet," she finally admitted. "We get it," Jenna said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Just don't shut us out." As they settled in her living room, Mia found herself wrestling with swirling emotions. Their presence was a comfort, yet she felt unmoored, and rather than feeling secure, she worried about the uncertainty still looming over her. Suddenly, the sound of her phone buzzing interrupted her thoughts. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Mia, it's me. We need to talk. Come to Mabel's diner at noon tomorrow." Her heart raced, dread pooling in her stomach. Was it her father, or maybe someone else? A tide of confusion surged within her, pulling tighter. Lucy asked, looking at her with concern. Mia's voice trembled. "Then we'll be with you," Jenna assured her, squeezing her hand. But deep down, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that wrapped around her like a cold blanket. Glancing back at her phone, she stared at the message, a storm gathering in her mind. Whatever awaited her at Mabel's was bound to change everything yet again. The next day felt heavier than before. As the clock ticked closer to noon, uncertainties filled her with dread. Why did she even agree to come back? Would she regret it? Arriving at the diner, she hesitated at the entrance, her fists clenched at her sides. Memories of yesterday flooded her mind, the laughter and heartfelt talks playing back like a lullaby gone awry. She stepped inside, the bell chiming softly above her head, and scanned the room. Her father was already seated, a cup of coffee in hand. But something was off. His eyes looked darting, his face strained. A pit formed in her stomach as she approached. She asked, feeling the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on her. "I got a call," he said, looking unsettled. Unsure of what to expect, Mia sat down. He hesitated before speaking, a flicker of uncertainty flashing across his face. And just like that, Mia felt the ground shift beneath her. Time held its breath as she leaned in, desperately wanting to understand what was coming next. "You need to know that I made mistakes." Her heart raced as she tried to process his words. What secrets lay buried in his past that could jeopardize the tentative bridge they were building? Mia's hands clenched into fists as anxiety coursed through her. Was she ready for whatever truth was about to unfold? As she stared into his eyes, they seemed to be shouting a message she couldn't yet decipher. And then everything changed.